long, the DEI witch is dead. Or is it? Well, yes, Donald Trump has issued a bunch of executive orders. Yes, Donald Trump is threatening federal funding from universities that don't comply with his orders on these issues. And yet, one of the biggest and most prominent universities in the country is still embroiled in DEI. And there is so much more to discuss on this. Joining us is Dr. Owen Anderson. He's currently embroiled in a legal battle with his university, ASU, over DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, as I like to call it, DIE, D-I-E. He is a professor of philosophy at ASU. He's also a pastor. He's a Princeton and Oxford speaker. He's a father of four, and he's a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu instructor. And he is right now in the spotlight for challenging ASU's controversial DEI policies. Dr. Anderson, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here and talk about these things.
So let's start with DEI. I mean, I think there's a sense among a lot of conservatives that it's gone. It's over. That was part of the Biden era. We're now in a new era, and yet not exactly at ASU, huh?
Yeah, well, and I would say probably not at any university. Even what we're seeing in the news maybe every week, this big university or that big university has defunded or taken down their DEI centers. But all that I've found so far, I've been keeping an eye on this stuff at ASU, is they're simply renaming it. So the same ideas are there, and it's important for the public to know what those ideas are because they're presented as very positive ideas, right? Nobody sells what they're doing as a bad thing. So they'll say, well, we just want to include everybody. And well, yeah, of course, a university should do that. But when you look into what they mean by their terms, inclusion means giving extra resources to people who are defined as marginalized and oppressed. So it actually turns out to mean not including some people and including, quote unquote, the right kinds of people. So my situation was I was required to take employee DEI training. And so we have a number of different kinds of employee training we have to take, like computer security, fire. So it's not surprising to have required training, but I get into the content and it's about the problem of whiteness and how the United States was founded in white supremacy and continues to be a white supremacist nation. And then there's an additional problem, which is heteronormativity. You have these people that think male and females are normative for relationships. And so it was clearly political, clearly ideological, things I did not agree with. And the original format had a quiz. So you had to put down the right answers, the approved answers, to show you passed. And so I'm being represented by the Goldwater Institute, which is a legal think tank that especially goes after government overreach. And they're pointing out, hey, this violates state law, Arizona law, and now it also violates federal law, executive orders. But we started a year ago. And what's fascinating is ASU doesn't offer the training as far as I can see on their webpage, and they're still going. And guess who they hired as their legal representatives for this case? Like, think of the biggest liberal law firm, and that's it. Perkins Coie.
Wow. Yeah, right? Lots of connections.
Yeah. So they hired Perkins Coie. What did they charge an hour? $750 an hour?
Yes.
In order to keep pushing this case against something that ASU can't even offer anymore. What's going on there? What's the politics behind that?
Yeah, that's amazing. Dr. Anderson, speaking of the bigger picture here, I mean, you find yourself as a conservative-leaning individual, a Christian pastor, in an environment that, like almost all major universities in America, is overwhelmingly liberal, dominated by forces that at best are hostile to Christianity, generally speaking. Talk to us about what that's like. I mean, how do you navigate that kind of environment, and why do you stay?
Yeah, well, that last is a good question. The environment is much worse than people think. And that's important to know because I think all of us would say, Christians would say, I know that you don't expect a liberal state university to be pro-Christian. You kind of just hold your nose and you get through it for whatever degree you need, like engineering or nursing. But I started a Substack to document this kind of abuse at ASU so that parents could know it's much worse than you think. You need to know what your kids are getting into. And the anger, the hostility, the frustration towards Christians is just palpable. It's not even, we're long past the days where they will pretend to be fair or pretend to be neutral. We're into the days of Christianity as the oppressor religion that colonized everyone else, and now it's their turn to be victimized.
Wow. And so how does DEI then intersect with this? Because, I mean, I went to university, I think I graduated maybe 12 years ago or something, and DEI wasn't a thing yet, although a lot of these same ideas about America being racist, that was all there. So how does DEI fit into this bigger picture of this almost revolutionary spirit we see in our institutions of higher learning?
Yeah, it's been something that's been in the atmosphere. The TV show The Office from 20 years ago had some hilarious skits like this with Michael Scott trying to bring in diversity training. So it's been there with the idea that if you're working in a place that has lots of different people with different backgrounds, you're going to have some conflict problems that might come up, and so the workplace wants to give you training on how to mitigate that. But then what happens is it gets infused into this critical race theory and cultural Marxist philosophy of conflict theory, which means that the basic driving force of history is a conflict between economic powers. And there's really no concern about truth, for example. Truth is whatever the powers say it is. And so that lens is taught to students in pretty well every subject. I mean, I've been documenting how ASU has it in their sciences, like their space exploration degree has DEI component. And I'm wondering to myself, is that what Elon Musk is looking for when he's hiring engineers to get us to Mars? Is that going to make the ASU graduates stand out? What does that have to do with exploring space? But it's not just the humanities, but unfortunately the humanities are soaked in it to the extent that it'd be like asking a fish if they're wet. Like if you ask a humanities professor, do you teach this stuff? They would probably, no, I'm a fair professor. I just teach ideas. They don't even see it because it's so saturated.
Wow. And so how do you combat this? And why is it important that people combat this? I mean, what happens if we just abandon the battlefield and say, all right, DEI, run wild, wokeness, run wild? So how do you fight it, and why is it important that it be fought?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because a lot of people say that, abandon these universities and start other ones. And I'm sympathetic to that. I'm not opposed to that. But I think the fact that there's only one conservative professor in my college speaking up, and the College Fix did a survey last November. They found only 19 professors at ASU out of thousands who confessed to voting Republican. So, I mean, that's like, 1% or less. It's bad. And so my view is parents in the state of Arizona and across the nation are going to send their kids to state universities. Their kids are going to try to get degrees that they think will get them good jobs, but on the way, they're going to be taught this stuff, and they need to be informed about that. If in the meantime we have other universities getting set up, that's great. But right now what's happened is the idea of an affordable university for the citizens of a state has been completely hijacked by this ideology. And so you stand up just because that's not right. That shouldn't be the way it is. That's not what tax money is for. And I do think, however, that we're at the cusp of a complete change, just like we're seeing with the global economy and national politics. I think when we look back in 30 years, we'll say this was a focal point of change in what our universities are, because I do believe students are saying, I'm not going to spend at least, 60 grand or more to be indoctrinated. I just want a computer science degree, and Google's offering that training for 8 months, and then I get a job. I'm going to skip university and just go straight to Google. So I think we're going to see a lot of, especially with AI driving education, we're going to see a lot of new ways to get your job training pop up that bypass these universities. And on top of that, there's a huge enrollment cliff coming, where about 18 years ago, people stopped having very many kids. And so that's going to hit in the next year or two, and it's a wave of about 10 years. And so many universities are going to go out of business. Our president said this in the beginning of January, so before January 20th, the executive orders. He said to our Board of Regents, I'm not worried about it for ASU because we'll rely on international students. Well, then January 20th, executive orders, that doesn't look like it's going to be a plan. So even very large universities are going to be in big trouble if they haven't correctly planned ahead. So if you add those two things together, enrollment cliff and students saying, I don't want to be indoctrinated anymore, it spells big trouble for the American university.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're at a turning point here, and the future is going to look very different. Going to the past for a moment, Dr. Anderson, how did we get into this mess where almost every normal person outside of academia looks at this and says, what is going on there?
Yeah, well, and that gets to your point of why stay there, because besides the fact of just standing up for what's right and good, things like philosophy and religious studies and history, literature are wonderful things to study. They're important parts of the human condition, and we're all enriched when we study them well. And the purpose of a humanities education should be to make us more virtuous and to make us wise. But we live in a situation now where those are actually scoffed at. The idea of virtue and wisdom. I mean, if you ask anybody on the street, do you go to a liberal arts degree to become virtuous? They say, no, it's the opposite. You go there to become less virtuous. And so it's almost as if you're in reverse land. And how did that happen? I think is connected up with ideological movements that believe something like this. The First Amendment requires we don't ever talk about Christianity. And so you're going to have to talk about something else. People always have a deep need to feel like they're part of a cause. Well, then the only other cause really open to them in the 20th and 21st century was some form of cultural Marxism, which is really just an aberrant view of Christianity. It tries to take the Great Commission and make it merely economic. And so I think that contributed to these professors with in some sense, they want to make the world better, but their only option was this economic and oppression theory. They were never themselves taught how to look at other options. And so it's a sad fact of a misreading of the First Amendment, because I think what we need to remember is that the First Amendment doesn't prohibit even state agencies from saying true things about God and the Bible. It prohibits them from making a Church of America. But what the White House webpage did on Easter was beautiful. It said, what I believe are true things about Jesus. He's a son of God. He died for sins. He rose from the dead. No one has to go to church because of that. And our universities should be the same thing. Our universities don't have to keep God out. They should be based on the fact that truths about God and the Bible are important parts of any education.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to pick up there because I've done some deep dives into the history of education around the world and in America. Almost all of our great universities that people think of were started by Christians for Christian purposes, to train up ministers of the gospel. And today, it's almost the exact opposite of that. How did that happen, that disconnect where Christians built up these institutions? You don't find this in pagan societies prior to the arrival of Christian missionaries. And then they somehow got hijacked to accomplish almost the exact opposite. What was that process? And is it reversible? Or, to the point you mentioned earlier, do we actually have to start building new institutions and leave some of the older ones behind?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's a lot of causes that went into why that happened, but you're 100% right. I ran a student seminar one time at Princeton, and Princeton's original goals, its founding motto, was to teach piety and the knowledge of God. And I asked the students, I didn't tell them why I asked it. I just said, are you here to learn piety and the knowledge of God? And then, no, like, why would you even ask? And I said, well, because that's your founding document. That's what Princeton was about. And Harvard was really similar. Harvard, of course, the first university in America, said that their goal is to teach the student to pursue the knowledge and the glory of God. And so you simply don't have, Harvard today is, the exact opposite of that. Same with Princeton. So yeah, the question of what happened is really good, and it's part of my intellectual work in intellectual history. I published on that somewhat, but I would say the long story short is the secularization that happened after World War II brought in this intellectual idea that you can't talk about Christian origins, and allowed the script to be flipped so that Christian missionaries, you mentioned missionaries, are the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And the cultural Marxists are the good guys. And so that's the current story right now at our universities. If there's a Christian missionary anywhere, that's bad, because they oppressed people. They took away their freedom to worship, the parts of nature that they were bowing down to. And what's much better is economic freedom from Marxism.
Yeah. How dare they stop child sacrifice and
I know.
On funeral pyres? It's just, it's so terrible.
Well, I don't know if you saw that article, but there, like a week ago, there was an archaeologist had written an article about the Mayans and how they had a special altar for killing infants. And one of the other scholars they interviewed said, well, I don't want you to think it was violent, though. It was just part of their life.
Well, we did an article about that at the New American, and AP really spinned it as like, the evil colonizers came and put a stop to this. It's truly incredible. Dr. Anderson, we have so many more things I want to ask you about, and we have so little time. I want to ask you quickly about Donald Trump. Trump has really hit hard on this issue. In fact, it looks like Harvard's going to lose $1 billion in funding. What do you see as the appropriate role for the federal government here? Is this a wise use of federal power? Can it be turned around then when the next Democrat president comes in to force bad things on universities? What do you make of these executive orders and funding decisions?
Well, that's always what the argument is, that whatever you do, your opponent will do down the road. And for a long time, that's been a real that's worked on Republicans. It doesn't work on Democrats. They'll do it. But for Republicans, they've said, okay, you're right. I want to be careful, because you don't want the White House webpage to say anything about Jesus, because the next time I might say something about Krishna. So we just keep everything out. And my view is, no, we don't want to do it that way. Government money always has strings. I mean, ask Hillsdale, universities that say we're not going to take any government money because of that. So it's always had strings. It's just that Harvard has never had to deal with that because they've been the ones who get to determine what the strings are. So all of a sudden, Harvard is told what every other university is told: you got to do things the government's way if you want their money. And I mean, that makes sense. I'm not too worried about, well, what if the next president does that, because we've already been living under that. And I think we're moving into a time now where Americans are waking up and saying, how much money do we spend on universities? $1 billion? And how much do they have in the bank? What is Harvard's endowment, $100 billion? Why are they taking money from the government at all when Hillsdale doesn't need to take government money? So I think there's going to be that change going forward. ASU is currently under 2 federal investigations for discrimination, which could affect their grant money. And ASU is much more vulnerable than Harvard, obviously, because it doesn't have that kind of endowment. So I think all the universities are trying to figure this out. But one thing people need to be aware of, you need to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. But the wise as serpents part is no one changed their mind. No professor or administrator converted on January 20th. So they might start talking a certain way for a couple of years. But if you were to overhear them in their wine and cheese parties, they'd be talking about how we're just waiting it out. DEI is the right thing to do. Cultural Marxism is the right thing to do. And so the idea that somehow there's going to be a change without changing people's minds, well, that'd be a false hope. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, I live in Florida. Our governor and our legislature passed some very strong laws banning all this DEI stuff. And all they did, just like you said, they just rebranded it, renamed it, changed the titles of the people running the programs, and continued on their merry way. So this is a systemic problem, to borrow some of their language. Dr. Anderson, before we wrap today, I do want to ask about Michael Crow. He is best known as president of Arizona State University. He was also the chairman of InQtel, which is the investment arm of the intelligence community, is how they like to market themselves. And together with his sidekick, George Post, they have been up to some really cutting-edge research on AI and biotechnology, biopharmaceuticals, even into the transhumanism stuff. ASU is kind of a hotbed of that sort of stuff. I know you've done quite a bit of thinking on AI and kind of the future. What does all this mean, and should people, and should Christians in particular, be concerned about what's happening at, for example, ASU and a lot of other universities?
Yeah, I try to stay on the cutting edge of AI in education, both to use it in my own classes, but also because, part of my profession, I need to be up to date on what's going on. And ASU is especially concerned about innovation. It loves that it's ranked number 1 in innovation in the, the news report on ranking universities. Yeah, right. So it's been number 1 for 10 years or something. So what that means is on technological innovation, the kinds of things you just named. And that's really the focus of ASU. The DEI stuff kind of gets imported in because you have humanities professors who think this is an issue, or you have a political administrator. But ASU is kind of pushing the ball down the field on technology. And so I think one of the things that Christians need to be aware of is you just got to be up to date on this stuff. It's not going to be a fad that comes and goes. It's here now, and it's going to continue in your life. And there's some good things about it. It will make some things easier. It will take over some tasks that we don't like to do. But it's also going to make it so it's very easy to track people, very easy to keep up to date on what you're doing and where you are and what you want to do. And it's very good at predictive models, because although we all love to think we have free will, the truth is that we're very habitual. And these computers can see, oh, you spend this money, here's what you're going to be doing next, and predict those things. And so we need to be aware of the ways that can be misused. And you also mentioned something like transhumanism, the attempts to get involved in genetic science or somehow mutating humans on their view to be better. But on a Christian view, it might say, well, wait, what do you think you're doing? This is actually potentially making things worse. You're killing unborn children to try to genetically alter one child, but what about the others that you killed? So I think there's a lot of things to be worried about.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very concerning. And folks, these changes are not like just some hypothetical future scenario. This stuff is happening right now as we speak. Just look at the news. Dr. Anderson, this has been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate what you had to say. I appreciate you coming on the program today. What's the best way for folks to follow your work and to stay on top of your legal battles with ASU?
Yeah, I try to keep my social media consistent, so it's Dr. Owen Anderson. So if you go on Substack, you'll see me, you'll see my picture, Dr. Owen Anderson, and the same for X. And I try to keep, especially my Substack, if you're curious, if you're a parent or a student or a pastor and you want to know what's going on at state universities, that's the purpose of my Substack, is to keep everyone informed about how bad it is.
All right. And Dr. Owen Anderson is the way to find that, huh?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Dr. Owen Anderson, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for coming on today, and thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks. That's all we have time for today. I'm Alex Newman for the New American Magazine. This is Conversations That Matter. Share this with your friends. Share this with your family. Share this with your legislators who might be curious about what they ought to do next time the budget bill comes up with billions of dollars for the state university. A lot of important points here. So thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, God bless you all.